So let's dive in. If you've been following my show for a while, you know that I have Ehlers Danlos. I don't talk about it much, but I've mentioned it with a few of the interviews that I've had here, and you might actually be able to find some of my more tearful conversations on other podcasts when I've talked about overcoming significant obstacles in my own world, especially with regard to health and fitness. So today, I wanted to be frank with you and be honest about what Ehlers Danlos is and how I've struggled with that, so that perhaps, one, you could better understand when I say what works for me might not necessarily work for you, because my body is definitely its own special cookie. And two, because as a trainer, many times people look at me and think, oh yeah, it's easy for you. You can just say this and you can just eat that. But at the heart of my health and fitness journey has been a very intense struggle. And I hope that by sharing it with you, that you might be able to relate and have a little grace for yourself in facing your own obstacles. I've actually been wrestling with whether or not to talk to you about this, because like most people who struggle with something, saying it out loud doesn't make it any easier to deal with. And I don't want your pity. Something that I've learned working with clients is that nobody who wants to better themselves wants your pity. When somebody takes the time to tell me about the obstacles that they're facing in exercising well, in eating well, in sleeping well, they are real obstacles, and there's no easy answer to overcoming all of them at once. But they're not encouraged if I say, man, I feel so sorry for you. I wish things were better. Instead, I see their eyes light up, and I see them stand up a little straighter with their shoulders back, when I can say, I know that's hard for you. You've done an amazing job handling it so far. I'm excited about the results you'll achieve when we find a more powerful way forward. So, as I talk to you about Ehlers Danlos, if you're going to talk to me about any of it, high-five me. Tell me you find beauty in my struggle and that you're inspired about how I'm facing it. And then remember me when you go to pick up your heavy cross every day. So what is Ehlers Danlos? If you look it up on the Mayo Clinic, it's defined as a syndrome or a group of inherited disorders that affect your connective tissue, primarily skin, joints, and blood vessel walls. Since connective tissue is a mixture of complex proteins and other substances that provide strength and flexibility to underlying structures in your body, a genetic disorder that affects connective tissue can be all-encompassing in the body. Most people with Ehlers Danlos usually have overly flexible joints, stretchy and fragile skin, and digestive and cardiac issues. In fact, the most severe form of the Ehlers-Danlos disorder is vascular type because it affects the walls of blood vessels and the integrity of those. It puts you at a higher risk of stroke, POTS, arrhythmias, and aneurysms. There are several different types of Ehlers-Danlos, and further research is needed in order to understand them all as deeply as possible. Many of them have genetic markers that can be tested, and so you're able to see whether or not you're a carrier for those things. My type, the hypermobility Ehlers-Danlos, currently doesn't have a consensus around the genetic alleles that cause the symptoms that I'm going through. Diagnosis usually involves what's called the Brighton scale, which is a series of tests to check for hypermobility. That, in conjunction with a few other symptoms, like severe and constant digestive discomfort and regular injuries and subluxations to different joint systems, all come together to form the Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis. To date, while there are some nutritional interventions that are suggested to help with the symptoms of Ehlers-Danlos, both the digestive and the joint hypermobility, there really is no treatment option available. My mom, who also has Ehlers-Danlos, has struggled mightily with it in her life. Maybe someday, if she's willing, I'll have her on and we can talk about it together. But as her child, I watch her be misdiagnosed in several different forms and fashions. She had degenerative discs in her lower back, and so they diagnosed her with degenerative disc disease. She also experienced myalgia, which is pain of the muscles, and so she was diagnosed with fibromyalgia. She had swelling in her joints, and many of her joints hurt regularly, and so she was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And her diagnosis, like many with Ehlers-Danlos, was treated as a pain problem. One doctor, with particularly awesome bed manner, told her that if she was a horse, they would just take her out back and shoot her. Imagine hearing that next time you go to your doctor's visit. Really fosters trust with your practitioner. And so having watched that as a child, I was very apprehensive about seeking any medical attention for anything. And it wasn't until the past few years that I even let a doctor put me through the Brighton scale to confirm my Ehlers-Danlos. Frankly, I didn't think there was anything they could do for me that I wasn't already doing well for myself. So why bother with the diagnosis on my medical record? But things changed about 4 years ago, when a student in the personal training academy that I was instructing needed some special help and special instruction because of what she was going through with her joints. I was teaching the students how to perform a proper kettlebell swing when she mentioned that her hip and her lower back seemed to pop out of place if she did a motion like that. And in conversation it came out that she had Ehlers Danlos. And many of the things she was describing to me about her condition and how her body responded to things were painfully familiar to me. And after that conversation, I realized I was doing a disservice to other people who were struggling with Ehlers Danlos by not getting diagnosed myself, since my quality of life is significantly higher than many people who have this disease. One, because I have a more mild form of it, but two, because of my background in nutrition, biomechanics, and exercise physiology, I've been able to mitigate many of the symptoms of my connective tissue issues, say that 10 times fast, with good musculoskeletal development. Not all. I still struggle with pain on a regular basis, and I'll tell you about that in a moment, but I don't require professional pain management, and I'm able to do many things that even people with, quote, normal joints can't do. The conviction was further compounded when I had my first son, knowing that Ehlers Danlos is a genetic disorder, but that my particular type of Ehlers Danlos is not something that could be genetically tested for. I imagined a future in which my boy would have to struggle with this stuff as well, and so I began to document what I was doing for myself, nutritionally and exercise-wise, that might benefit him in the future. And then when Kristen was pregnant with our second boy, I decided that that documentation was worth going public about. So in February 2019, I sat down to write out my story, to try to make sense of what I'd gone through, and also to be an encouragement to anybody who is going through other similar things. I submitted my story to the Ehlers Danlos Society, and 2 weeks ago, they published my article. I'm going to share those words with you here. My name is Alexander Van Houten. I have Ehlers Danlos syndrome, and though living with pain and the constant threat of injury every day is no walk in the park, I'm thankful for the trajectory my life has taken because of this disease. When I was a child, I was, like most boys, a hyperactive, rambunctious little dude. My first ankle sprain was at the age of 3 while playing airplane with my mom. She also has Ehlers Danlos, but wasn't diagnosed until my late teens. Fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, and degenerative disc disease were the labels until somebody put it all together for her. When we came in with my sprained ankle, the doctor eyed her strangely, suspecting possible abuse in the home. Little did he know that that would be the first of 100 or more sprains, strains, and dislocations of joints, ankle, wrist, shoulder, and hip especially, caused not by abuse, but by the combination of gravity, activity, and tendons and ligaments that act more like gummy bears than Kevlar. I spent much of my young life constantly active, kickboxing, track, JROTC adventure training, and constantly injured. Truthfully, I didn't think much of it, except that I settled into the pattern of being a normal kid, then getting injured, and then healing, and then getting back to my activities, and repeating the cycle over and over again. Looking back, though, there were some significant signs that if I'd seen the right medical professional, or perhaps if my mom had at the time, it would have clued somebody in to help me understand what I was going through. Extremely flexible skin and joints, digestive discomfort and issues, touching my nose with my tongue, severe and debilitating, quote, growing pains by the doctor's standards in my hips, knees, back, and through adolescence, and then injuries that were completely unrelated to active sports life. I mean, really, who sprains their ankle while making their bed? As time went on, I became a young adult dealing with the injuries, and I began my undergraduate studies at Vanderbilt University. Having always been active and a sports-minded person, I continued those habits into college. I played ultimate frisbee with my friends, picked up basketball, and even started training for a marathon, all while lifting weights, running, and then rehabbing myself when sprains or strains inevitably came about. It turns out that you actually learn a whole lot about anatomy, kinesiology, biomechanics, and exercise programming when you have to rehabilitate yourself every few months. And after receiving multiple requests from classmates for training programs and exercise advice, I actually earned my certification in personal training. I wanted to make sure that 1, I knew what I was talking about, and 2, I figured the service could help pay some bills if I had a credential or two. What I found training people is that training adaptations always seemed to come harder for myself than they did for others that I worked with. I didn't dwell on it in a poor, pitiful me kind of way. I actually found it powerful to make an impact and share the freedom and well-being of exercise and lifestyle change that I found for myself when I wasn't in the injury cycle. Truthfully, nobody likes being a caged bird. I graduated with a pre-med degree, but I ultimately decided to pursue my personal training career and passion. It took a climbing accident in my mid-20s to finally bring some clarity to my continued injury cycles and my worsening digestive discomfort. If you've got a weak stomach, close your ears for a second. I was on a climbing wall, bouldering, which is climbing about 10 to 12 feet or so, and then you fall on a mat when you're done with the course. I had done this particular course over and over and over again, and my arms were getting tired, and at one point my hands slipped off one of the rocks that I was supposed to be holding myself to. I felt a little funny on the mat, and it wasn't until I went to stand up that I looked down to see that my left foot was not facing the direction it was supposed to be facing. I had dislocated my ankle. Without thinking, I reached down, and I popped it back into place myself. My friend who was with me wasn't much help, because he threw up all over the mat after that. Luckily, a young woman nearby kept her wits about her, and I told her to go to the front and grab an ice pack and a wrap, because I was about to go into shock. It was a pretty rough episode, and it'll stay burned into my mind for a while. I got some help going to my car, and then the drive through downtown Dallas with a manual clutch was brutal on that left ankle as I made my way home. When I got home, I decided not to go to the emergency room, because what were they going to tell me anyway? $1,200 later, they would tell me whether or not it was broken and whether or not I should keep it immobile. So I opted to hit urgent care the next day. Hopped on one foot, into work the next day, and trained my clients with my knee propped up on an office chair. It was bad. It hurt like hell. It was very swollen. And if it wasn't for the brace that I'd wrapped very tightly around it all day, I might not have made it through. But I finished my shift, and I went to urgent care after that. Still wearing my personal training uniform, I was very cognizant of my footfall since I was hopping on one foot to get all the way to the urgent care room and plopped down pretty tired on the table. When my x-ray revealed no damage to the bone, the doctor came in to examine my ankle. It was black and blue, and it was very swollen, and he listened as I recounted my story of falling off the climbing wall. He looked me in the face and said, "Alex, I gotta tell you, I've never seen an ankle dislocation that didn't break a bone." And then he said, "Either you're very lucky, or your tendons and ligaments are ridiculously flexible. Do you have Ehlers Danlos syndrome?" I said, "Truly, I don't know, but I'm glad I don't have a bone break." He referred me to a specialist who would be able to diagnose me with Ehlers Danlos, but I didn't have time for that. I was working about 80 hours a week, and all I knew is that I had an ankle to rehab while I had clients to train. Besides, what were they going to do for me anyway? I took my prescription for high-dose ibuprofen, and then I resolved myself to lots of icing, lots of elevation, and some stubborn grit as I retaught myself how to walk. After that, I spent the better part of the last 5 years wrestling with the suggested Ehlers Danlos diagnosis. And before meeting that student and having my kids, I didn't see a reason to put a name to the struggle, or even to talk about it. It was my cross to bear, and whether it had a name or not, I was still going to eat as well as I could, exercise as intelligently and consistently as possible, try really hard not to injure myself, and when I did, not to have too much of a pity party when things got tough and painful. I wish I could say I've found a cure, that I don't dislocate joints anymore, that there aren't times I have to say no to a game of tag or wrestling with my 4-year-old because Dad knows his ligaments and tendons aren't going to hack it today. I wish I could tell you that I don't get irritable on a regular basis, because though I can deadlift 300 pounds, twisting to put a baby in the car or put a seatbelt on can sometimes set me back for 48 hours. I wish I could tell you that I'm standing to record this podcast right now, because it makes me sound more personable and energetic, not because it hurts my back to sit down for more than 5 minutes at a time. I also wish I could tell you that there was a certain amount of fiber and a certain source of nutrients that I could eat that didn't roll through my loose digestive system like a herd of unimpeded wild horses. But I can't say those things. The truth is, sometimes it seems like everything sucks, and that's further compounded when I can help my clients get into better shape for themselves and overcome non-genetic obstacles. Well, that sort of thing's just not in the cards for me. But when I stand up and I look around at what other people are struggling with, I realize that what you're dealing with is not that much different from what I'm dealing with. We've all been dealt a hand of cards. Whether it's your personality, psychiatric disorders, genetic disorders, or just life right now, it's not easy to bear your cross. But I'm here to tell you today that it matters. Even if it seems mundane, the pain, the difficulty, the obstacles that you've encountered today and tomorrow and probably the next day, the way you face those things matters. And here are the reasons that I've found why. 1. You never know who's watching you. Even before I was ready to admit that I had a genetic disorder that made things really difficult for me, people watched me pursue my own health and fitness, and they said, "Man, I wish I had your determination. I wish I had your inspiration. You inspire me every day. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing because of what you're doing." And that's true across the board. Whether you're a dedicated mom, juggling your career, your marriage, and yourself, and having a hard time finding the time to do cardio, your coworkers are watching you, and you inspire them every time you pass up the donut and eat something better for yourself, because you know you want better for you, and you want better for your kids. Or you're the dad that's traveling all the time, but you find it in yourself to go the extra mile to love your wife and kids well. And then you even have a little energy left over to pour into other people who are having a hard time wrestling with their work and their family. Or maybe you've overcome addiction or an eating disorder, at least to the point that it's not owning you every day, and you can recognize that struggle in other people and be there for them when they need you. You never know who's watching you, and if that's inspiring, pick up your cross today. 2. Sometimes you can choose to laugh or cry, and somehow finding the humor in things can give you and others the courage to rise above and overcome. Whatever you're dealing with, you only get to deal with it today once. Would you rather spend today laughing or crying? And I don't mean fake laughing. I mean the kind of laughing where you look deep down and you can truthfully find the humor in your situation and your attitude. My oldest loves to wrestle a lot, and normally I really enjoy wrestling with him too. But sometimes I'm in a rough spot, and I know wrestling is just going to be injurious, and I'm not going to be that much fun to wrestle with anyway. So I suggest building a fort, because that's something he also enjoys. And I lay on my back in the fort with him, and we like to tell stories back and forth. Once upon a time, there were 3 pigs. Or once upon a time, there was a boy who had to watch a field of sheep. Or once upon a time, there were 3 bears, and so on and so forth. And the game is, I ask him to tell me the same story back. But if I hadn't consciously chosen that today I'm going to laugh about this thing, I would have missed out on the amazing attempt of my 4-year-old to put together all 3 stories. Once upon a time, Dada, there were 3 little pigs who were supposed to watch the wolf, but he turned around and he ate them, and they lived happily ever after. The end. Could you imagine how sad it would be if instead, and try to drown that in some food or some entertainment, rather than making some good memories with my boy? I'm always reminded of Stephen Hawking, who had ALS so bad that he lost movement in every single part of his body, except for one very small muscle in his eye, who said, when asked about why he continues to engage in adventures from his wheelchair, quote, "I want to show people that just because they're disabled in body doesn't mean they need to be disabled in spirit. So your struggle matters, especially if you have the opportunity today to choose laughing over crying. And lastly, what the hell else are you going to do anyway? You're here, and if you're listening to my voice, you're not dead, which means you're not done. I know it's a heavy weight to bear, and it's not easy, but every single one of us can sit on the edge of our bed today, and we can say, what am I not doing that I know I need to be doing, that I'm willing to do, that I can start today? And then the corollary, what am I doing that I need to stop doing, that I'm willing to stop doing, that I can stop doing today? And even if all of your willpower put toward those 2 things only gets you like 50% compliance from yourself, that's better than nothing. And as much as I would like to do that every day, there's definitely at least 2 days a week where no amount of willpower is going to make me any progress on any front. I don't know about you, but the meaning of those things makes the suffering a bit more bearable. So in closing, thanks for giving me an opportunity to share with you a bit about what I handle with Ehlers Danlos. It's a daily struggle, and I pray that in my struggle, I inspire you. It's been my experience that no matter who you're talking to, if you'll go about 2 or 3 layers deep, there is some kind of intense suffering, trauma, or even disease that they live with every single day, and it's a miracle that they get out of bed. If that's you, if you getting out of bed today and doing what needs to be done is a living, breathing miracle that not many people know about, hats off to you. You're amazing, and I hope you're blessed today. Thank you for doing what you do. For the people who depend on you, it really matters. And you're not alone. Thank you for listening to my thoughts on my struggle with Ehlers Danlos. This is quite the unconventional show. I realize it's not in keeping with everything that we've done up until this point, so I don't intend to change that now. I think that the best thing I could do to close this message with integrity is say a prayer for anyone listening who's bearing a heavy cross today. So if you're a praying person, bow your head with me, and if you're not, you can just listen. Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the man or woman who's listened to this message today. I pray, God, that the burden that they're carrying right now be lightened a bit, and that you bless them with a powerful awareness of the difference that they make in the people who are watching them bear their burden. I know that we'd rather not whine about it, and I know the courage that it takes to wake up every morning and decide to keep moving forward in spite of the pain. So whatever's going on under the surface, whatever makes things difficult, I pray for the strength to handle it, the gratitude to see what good meaning comes out of it, and the encouragement that we need to keep moving forward. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you for joining us for your 1% Better today. Don't forget to subscribe for the podcast. Leave us a raving review to tell others how Better Daily has helped you in your journey. If you want more Better Daily, download our app and join our Betterment family at betterdaily.live. Use code POD to get 25% off your subscription. That's POD, all caps, to save 25% on your subscription. We all have a cross to carry. It's lighter when we do it together. Go to betterdaily.live today.